Thank you everybody for joining. Again, this is AJ Ansari, and we're going to cover how to design reports in Microsoft Office for Dynamics NAV. So before I get started and actually start showing you functionality, I would like to bring up a quick poll. I'm going to go ahead and launch this poll. I want to get a sense for what version of Dynamics NAV you're using today. So this should be up on your screens right now. We'll give you about 30 seconds or so to make sure that you can answer that poll. So within about the next 15 seconds, I'm going to start closing it. I think still have a lot of people answering it. 60% voted. All right, 5 seconds. All right, well, perfect. I'm going to close the poll, and let's see if I can share the results with you. I'm seeing a good mix of Dynamics NAV 2015 users and Dynamics NAV 2009. Now I realize this was a broad category, and I'll explain why I broke it down that way when I get to my next slide. I try to break it down by the types of functionality available. I see most of the people are using the role-tailored client. That is good, because the functionality we're going to show today will not apply to classic Dynamics NAV users. So with that, let's go ahead and let's move on from the polls. All right, and let's go ahead to our slide deck again. So what are your reporting options with Dynamics NAV? It depends on the version, and that's why I was curious about the poll on the last slide. If you're using Dynamics NAV 5.0 or older, you may, or you have used it at least at some point in the past, you may be familiar with the old report designing tool. The method was internal to Dynamics NAV. The report designer and the coding components were all inside the software, and it was called the sections-based reporting. You did not have any options to report with RDLC. Let me actually hide this view. I think for some reason, maybe my preferences have you seeing my GoToWebinar bar as well. So let me collapse that. So you would not see RDLC as an option. There were no Excel and Word-based reporting options. But there was another modern reporting tool, which was SSRS, if you had a SQL-based database. In 2009 Classic, the options were fairly similar, but a 2009 role-tailored client, if you were using that, then you could start using the report design capabilities of RDLC, which was Visual Studio-based. Excel was still not available. After 2009 R2 role-tailored client came about, and versions going forward, we started to get reporting capabilities with Microsoft Excel. For the folks who are not using 2015 or 2016, you will not be able to benefit from the Word reporting sections that I'm going to cover today. So know that I've seen, I think half of the people today are using the 2009 R2 RTC, 2013 or 2013 R2. You'll benefit from the things I'll show you around Microsoft Excel, but the Microsoft Word-based reporting options do not apply. 2015 and 2016, you'll be able to get the full breadth of reporting capabilities available. Now, the only reason you see an N under sections is this functionality has basically been deprecated after 2009 role-tailored client came about. So let's talk about reporting with Microsoft Excel. Where would we use it? It's a great tool for financial reports. It's great for tabular reports, great for queries that you want to do. Now, completely separate from this conversation, there is a query-based object that was introduced to Dynamics NAV, I'm thinking, back in 2013, that allows you to create queries like you would do in Microsoft SQL to get a resulting view made up of information from multiple tables. You can create links and relationships tying tables together and then create an output. That querying model is quite fast and powerful. Unfortunately, it is not available unless you have access to the object designer and to the development environment or the development area of Dynamics NAV. Your typical business analysts and reporters may not have access to that, which means they're precluded from using that querying functionality. And with Microsoft Excel, we're able to get querying capabilities without using that query object tool. So I'll cover a little bit of that as well. So what are the tools that you can use with Excel-based reporting? Well, you could certainly use the Jet Express tool that you get with your purchase of Microsoft Dynamics NAV. So if you have a version of Dynamics NAV that is 2009 R2 or newer, then the Jet Express functionality is available right out of the box. it does require some extra steps. So we're not going to cover how to install a Microsoft Excel Jet toolbar today or any of those things, but if you're looking for help on getting the Jet components installed or how to download it, getting the objects in your database, reach out to us. I have our emails at the end of this presentation on a slide, and we can get you somebody who can, from our team, who can, within a limited amount of time, download Jet, deploy it on your server, deploy the client-based components on individual users' machines or the business analysts creating reports, and you'll be up and running. You can also use direct from Excel tools that are available without using Jet. So with 2009 R2 or newer, or 2009 and newer, we had web services introduced. From 2013 onwards, those web services also supported the OData web service protocol. So you can use OData-based connections if you're using 2013 or newer. If you're in 2009, you could still use ODBC-based connections. Without boring everybody to death, I'll point out one distinction between using OData and ODBC, and that is OData or web service-based connections can leverage something called flow fields in Dynamics NAV. So flow field is a calculated field. If you've ever been on the customer ledger entry screen in Dynamics NAV, that shows us the customer invoice number, and it also shows us the amount on the invoice. Nowhere in Dynamics NAV tables is there a fixed field called amounts. It is always calculated on the fly. The customer ledger entry calculates that value. It gets it from a value on the sales invoice header table, which is called amount, instead of storing that amount, that value directly on the customer ledger entry table. And the sales invoice header table indirectly calculates it on the fly as the sum of the amounts, including tax, for each of those lines that are on the sales invoice lines table. So these are all calculated fields in Dynamics NAV. Or for an easier example, you go to the customer card, you have a field called balance. That balance field is a calculated field. These calculated fields, which are called flow fields in proper Dynamics NAV terminology, are not available in ODBC-based connections. As a matter of fact, if you were to open up Microsoft SQL, if you were to open up the database of Microsoft Dynamics NAV and look on the customer table, you would not find a field called balance because it is not a proper SQL field. It is a logical field, a calculated field, or again, as Dynamics NAV calls it, a flow field. So those types of flow fields are only available when we use JetExpress or when we use web services or database connections. The older ODBC or connecting directly to the SQL database will not give us those. What does that mean to us? If you're creating a report and you need to find the balance, you need to create the rules that allow Excel to understand what the balance field would show from a customer record. It would not be able to pull that as a value. Now additionally, if you're using Microsoft Excel, some of you may have also used Power Pivot. I'll show that ever so briefly if time permits, but Power Pivot essentially is an add-on for Excel that was free in, I think, with Microsoft Excel 2010 as a separate download. And then with 2013 and 2016, it is available for free, but only available with certain SKUs of Microsoft Excel. It's called the Office Pro Plus SKU. So either you can buy Office Pro Plus from your favorite software vendor, or if you're on the Office 365 subscription, you'll have to make sure that your subscription licensing model allows for or includes the Office Pro Plus SKU. If you have any questions, if you're not sure whether your Excel has it or not, feel free to contact me offline, and I can work with you to identify it. Power Pivot essentially gives us some really robust capabilities of analyzing data, allows us to connect tables and form relationships between them, etc. So with that, let's go ahead and take a look at some Excel-based reports. So let's escape our PowerPoint. Now I'm logged in to Microsoft Dynamics NAV as a sales order processor. Now when I'm using Microsoft Dynamics NAV, let's say I'm interested in running a financials-based report. Most of the times people use account schedules within Dynamics NAV to run financials. So you're probably familiar with a view that looks something like this. Now, depending on the role center you use, you may have a different way of getting to account schedules, but here I might pull up something like my cash flow statement or my income statement here. These are all the sample reports that are included in the Cronus USA company, and I would usually run this by first defining all my rows, the properties of the rows, Then I would also identify the columns, create some column layout setups that I might be interested in using, and then I could run this by clicking on Overview. One of the things that is often cited as a drawback of using account schedules is that you are not able to do a lot of addition of charts and graphs and colors, etc. within that report. Some of that has changed with the newer versions of NAV, but adding charts or graphs is still a bit of an issue. The other part is some people occasionally find this is not as flexible. It's really, I would think it's more of a subjective matter than an objective matter. It is actually quite powerful, but it may. On the end, everybody knows Excel well. So with that, one of the things that we can do is take all this information and start designing a financial report in Excel. Now you might be tempted to start off with export to Excel, and what I would say is if you were to use this function, you're going to be using a template that Microsoft has pre-created, and this does not use the JetExpress based functionality. So let's still take a look at what that would resemble. You would end up with a view like this. Now, you can save this file. You saw when I told it to export to Excel, there was also an option to update an existing document. So you would be able to update the document from time to time. Now, when I'm using JetExpress, let's go ahead and fire up Microsoft Excel separately. Let's go ahead and hit New. If I have my Jet toolbar installed and properly configured, I should see this menu right up here. This toolbar is going to allow me to create, modify, and publish reports. When I create a report with Excel using the Jet Reports toolbar, anybody else who has this Jet Reports toolbar would be able to modify that report, would be able to refresh that report, or run it again with changes and options. If you are not a JetExpress user, you still do have other ways of working with it. So you would still be able to publish this report as a regular Excel file, and the person utilizing it would simply go ahead and capture or see the values as they were last refreshed. So if you're creating a financial report and you want to distribute it to your auditors, that's a good way to go about it. So what type of reports are available? Are there any financial reports that are pre-created? Let's explore that. If you have used Microsoft Windows 8.1 or newer, you may actually have the Jet Reports application downloaded already. So from the Microsoft Store, you can download the Jet Reports player for Microsoft Dynamics NAV. This is available for Windows 8, for Windows 8.1, and Windows 10. Now if you're using, so you can simply go to Jet Reports. This is one of the last things you would do if you have everything already installed. This is just a helpful library of reports. If you're in Windows 7, you can still go to the Jet Reports website and you can download them. So up here in my browser, for example, there's a separate product site within Jet Reports for JetExpress for Word, and there's one for JetExpress for Excel. So here you can look and you can start looking at Microsoft Dynamics NAV, and from here you can start downloading some examples or the report player, etc. Now, by getting this library of reports, there's some nice little pre-built reports that I can always look at. I'll show you one of these, and I'll show you one that I have created, explaining to you the things that I've done. So if I were to be interested in a P&L, let's go ahead, on the trial balance. There you go. This is a sample report that includes a balance sheet, a P&L, etc. So from this library, it will open up a report. Now, this report is not ready to use with your company. Some reports may be, and some reports certainly won't. So what you're able to do is look at this pre-built concept, and then notice here these account numbers may not rhyme or coincide with your account numbers. So you'd first need to change aspects here by typing in your account numbers and your descriptions. And once these have been changed and you refresh the report, it would then refresh showing information using your data. So there are a lot of reports like this that are pre-built that you can, as I say, use for inspiration. There's also a little bit of README information on how you would be able to work with this report. Our team can also help you utilize a report like this. Now I've created something very similar, and I'm going to briefly pause my screen and load this. Then you can see what I'm talking about. So the report that I have created uses Cronus USA data. It uses a similar concept, and I've built some charts and graphs as well with it. So nav demo tools. Okay, let's see if I can bring this report up again. You should now be seeing my Excel-based report. So the way I've created this report was a similar concept. You put in your account numbers, put in your descriptions, and then I created some formulas using the JET tool, and I was able to copy and paste these down. I also created some distribution by the department dimension, which is one of my global dimensions in the Dynamics NAV demonstration environment. So let's design this and see how we would have created something similar. So let's go to JET. Anytime you want to make any change, you're going to go to use the design function first. So when I'm doing my design, you will normally see something called auto plus height plus values. This is a JET-based field, so you don't want to touch it or disturb it. It's also a separate column called column A and a row 1, which is dedicated for JET Express use. So we don't want to do anything within column A or row 1. Now the rest of the information that I have here, for example, once I have my account number, I've got a company name, I've got my current period dates that I want to work within, and now I can start putting in some formulas. So I click in this field and I say GL. So this pulls up the GL wizard. And here I tell the system, excuse me, what it's going to show here. So I'm asking it for a net change. Now in JET reports options, net change doesn't exist as a possible option to choose. Net change is simply balance between a starting date and an ending date. So I've said balance for the account in cell B10, which is 41,300, between a starting date E3 and an ending date F3. So I've locked those cells in with the dollar symbol. And if I wanted to also have it run off of a specific company, I can set that. Now when I run Dynamics NAV and JET reports together, I can tell JET reports to always consider a specific company as my default, which you see over here. But if I want to create a report that merges data or includes data from different companies or allows my user to selectively change the company and run it, I can just create the company as a value. Now if I want to include my global dimensions, 1 and 2, I can directly point to them. My global dimensions will be mentioned by name, like department and project code. If I have additional dimensions, my shortcut dimensions can also be referenced by using an analysis view. Now some of you may be familiar with how analysis views work, and if you're not, that's something we'd be happy to cover with you in a separate session. Creating an analysis view allows you to get data from dimensions 3 through 8, so those shortcut dimension information could then be used within the context of a report. Now immediately, if I want to be sure that what I have selected yields a result, I can run the evaluate function option. So it's going to go ahead and run that and tell me if there's any value that it's seeing within it. Is there a resulting value between the dates that we have selected? So this particular report doesn't have any value to show, so that's fine. What I'm going to do here is say, I think I know that I've got this particular information. Okay, and this is also going to be in 2018. I use this for different reports off of different companies and databases. So the last one that I used had demonstration data in the year 2016. So now that I have some information in 2018, this might be a little more meaningful. So let's go back to my GL wizard. Now I'm selected on row B12, and when I evaluate function, it will tell me that there's a balance that's coming out. This is good news, so I can see, and even on the right-hand side, you can see each of these resolve to the proper. B12 is 42,500 is the account number. I'm looking at this balance between these dates, etc. I do this and I hit OK, and this tells the system this is the formula that I want to use for the cell. Now I don't want to go ahead and I don't want to make this a process that I have to repeat for every single row. So I can copy this value. This is the wizard-driven formula that it creates that I do not need to learn or memorize. I can just copy and paste this all the way down, and every cell that needs to get this information will go ahead and receive it. You may have certain fields that you're just manually creating, like gross profit, simple Excel formula, my total revenues versus my cost of goods sold, something of that nature. And then where I'm using a departmental breakdown, what I've done differently is simply cited the department code that I want to filter on. So same GL function, everything else is the same as before, except the department code is locked to the department sales. So locked on I7. So that's how the system knows which one it's going to, what dimension it's going to filter by. Then I went about and created some Excel-based formulas. Excel-based reports, and they quickly pop up and they're usable within this report going forward. Anytime I would like to refresh this report or publish this report, I would first just click Report. So this gives me a published view. The system's going to quickly run all this information in the background, and here I have my report detail. Now, when I was configuring JetExpress, I also told it that I do like to be able to drill down. So provided I have a Dynamics NAV connection, I can now drill down over here and I can see all the detail that comes from these cells. Now, final thing to kind of be aware of within this report, and I'll show you a few other things, is if you have certain types of drop-down fields, you can quickly use these for good effect. I don't want my user to have to type in my company name every time. I just want them to be able to select these values. So what I've done is I've created a drop-down list here. When I go into my design view, let's also pull up my data list. Here you will see I've created a data list with all the different Cronus companies that are available to my users. And here on sheet 1 from this cell, some of you may already know this because this is common Excel functionality, I can go into data and data validation and tell it that this contains a list, or this cell, selected cell, contains a list from this data source. Simply by doing that, Excel now knows that my user can come here and they can put this information up. There are other things you can also do. So there are some reports, and I'll show you examples of those, where you can have the option to select filters pop up on the screen. So in JetExpress-based report training, we often talk about those as well. Instead of having the user enter or make any changes from a drop-down list, you can have that prompt on your screen. So instead of messing with this pre-created report, I'll show you that example in a different type of report. Let's go ahead and we'll close this one out and I'll create another report, moving on from financials. I told you that Excel can also be used for creating query-based reports, tabular reports. So what do I mean by that? We're going to go back into Jet, and I'm going to say this time we're going to use a table builder. Now, if you're using the Express or the free version of Jet reports, there's a couple of things to be aware of. I can build queries using the table builder, but if I ever want to change the definition of that query, or if I want to add new fields, etc., the free version doesn't allow me to use the wizard again. The free version requires me to make changes by hand, so I have to understand the Jet formulas, the Jet GL, NL, and so on formulas. If you're using a paid version of Jet reports, like Jet Essentials, then you would be able to use a table builder, again, to modify pre-created queries. Let's start off with a very simple one. Let's go to Add Table. We're going to type in customers. Let's just get a list of all of our customers. So our customer table. Okay, and then I'm going to include some fields. So show me my customer's number. Show me my customer's name. Show me my customer's salesperson code. Okay, now I may also want to introduce another level of type of field, which is my flow field, because I want to see what the customer's balance due is. So I put these. If I want to rename a particular field, I can just click up here and call it this, for example. Customer number. I hit OK. And now it creates all of these different options. So here is where we're seeing there's some filters that have been created by the system already. So I've got this method, if you will, of identifying all the headers that will be used, all the fields that are going to be used. And if I wanted to then add another field, I would just need to be able to understand how to write this formula. Let's run this report first. Let's go back to the Jet toolbar and say report. I'm going to refresh it. And now I can see my customer number. I can see my customer's name, my salesperson code, and then the balance due. Here I can change the formatting to see a format that I actually like with the $sign, etc. if I need to. Now, anytime I want to refresh this report, if there is a new customer, I simply click the refresh button and all this information will be loaded up. One thing you can always keep in mind is if there are things you do not want your users to be able to change, make sure that you're just locking that aspect of the spreadsheet. So as with any Excel spreadsheet, you can lock out cells and you can lock people out of certain areas. Let's also talk about something else. If you want people to be able to filter this report on the fly, now I will go back in design mode because the best practice is when I'm dealing with Excel-based reports, it's always a good idea, or JET-based reports, to go into the design mode if I want to change certain things. So if I want to add this particular column formatting to show this particular method in accounting-based format of the numbers, I would do that, and then when I refresh my report, oops, oh, this time it decided not to. In the past, it's typically worked this way. I've had to make sure that I did that in design view. There are a few nuances that do happen when I don't use the design view and make changes here. If I want to add slicers, etc., I can do that too. So I can insert a slicer and say, allow me to filter my list by salesperson code. This is traditional Excel functionality available in most of the newer versions. So here I can quickly click and format, filter down on JR or Peter Sato's customers, etc., and shows me a shortened list of those type of clients. Now, if I needed to go back in, and if I wanted to add another column, and such as address or address 1, this is where, because I'm using the Express version, I'm not able to use the wizard again. So what do? It's very simple once you understand how this works. I can go to my column G and say address. I do need to know the exact field name of that I'm looking for. If you have access to the development environment of Dynamics NAV, it's very easy. If not, there are other ways as well. But let's assume you do have access. So I'm going to go here and say, look for my customer table, which is my table 18. And the field that I'm looking for is simply called address. So wonderful. Let's go back here. And I'm going to, that was the header, so I could call it anything I need. Here, just like it says in the other fields, I'm going to say address. Very simple, nothing to memorize. When there are flow fields, this is where you need to understand how to write them. These are the ones that are a little bit longer. So it kind of explains how this flow field was acquired. Now that I have it and I refresh, okay, obviously it doesn't like me very much anymore. Don't you just love it when you try to show something and it doesn't quite pull up automatically? I think there's another reason for that is this table definition. I forgot to update this. Right now it's only considering information between D4 and G4 for the values. So I need to tell it to say D4 to H4, and then for the headers. There we go. Now let's try to run this. Voila. So this time it has our address information. So all that information that we were looking for. Now you can create some options, as I told you before, that pop up for the user to populate. How do we do that? Let's go ahead and create another one from scratch. Those options are easiest to add when I'm creating a report from scratch than trying to understand how to add it later manually from the design view. So table builder. This time I'm going to create a 2-layered report. So we were looking at customer table. We were looking at customers table with a salesperson code. Maybe I wanted to have a user-friendly representation. I want to show the salesperson's name. I may also be interested in getting some other information from another table, etc. So let's start off first by looking at the customer table again. I've noticed this part always runs just a little bit slower as it's trying to get that information. So if it doesn't work right away or it's not as immediately responsive, don't be alarmed. Okay, so I'm going to say number. No, I do not want the application. I do want the name. I do still want I do want my balance, so we'll get this balance from the flow field. Now, instead of getting just a salesperson code, I would like my salesperson name. So what I'm going to do is click on Add Table. I'm going to link this to my salesperson purchaser table. It's important to know what my tables are in Dynamics NAV. It is going to be critical to write a query. So let's give it a second. All right. Now, where possible, it's going to create links automatically. JetExpress is pretty smart. So it knows off the top that this type of a link, these two tables are going to link this way. The code on the salesperson table must equate the salesperson code on the customer table. You can see that table-to-table relationship and the field-to-field within the tables that map. If you do not like this relationship, you can create another link. Now, what I'm going to do next is then go into my salesperson purchaser table, and from here, select my name, the salesperson's name, and the salesperson's job title, should that exist. And I can change my titles and so on, the column headers if I like. Now, finally, what I want to do is to be able to have some options come up. So here, what we're going to say is under filters, we'll add a filter, and we will have a location code filter. We'll say ask at runtime what the location code is. So either I can pre-filter this to location code equals blue, green, red, yellow, white, whatever, or I can say user defined, which means it's going to prompt us. If I also want to see if the user selects more than one value, if I want to see what that location code is, let's just go ahead and add this as well. So it'll say location code, make sure that that shows. So what we have done here is created a filter that's going to be prompted at runtime, and we will be able to see what the location filter is as well. So let's hit OK. Now you see it's created an options line here, and you see the options are filter for location code, and this is going to be selected at runtime. Let's go ahead and run this. You'll be prompted this way. So you can use a setup like this to be prompted for the department code if you're running a financial report, or the company code, etc. Here I can say run it for yellow. Run, and it's going to show me all my customers in yellow with my salesperson's name. So these type of queries are very easily done with Excel using the JET tool. Now, if you're looking to do this without JET reports, this is still possible. I would show you two other ways of making it work. One is if you're using Microsoft Excel 2013 or newer, or maybe even 2010 and newer, and you're using Dynamics NAV on-premise, you will have the Dynamics NAV toolbar that can be installed. This is a very effective way to get data from NAV and then refresh it. So let's leave the screen. Let's go back into Dynamics NAV. Let's pull up my list of customers. Okay, and then I'm going to filter this list of customers like I did up on my last report to location code yellow. And I'm going to say send to Microsoft Excel. Depending on the version you're in, if you have the Dynamics NAV toolbar installed, you will see your server information, the date and time that this was sent. This list can be refreshed at any point in time to show an updated version. So if I were to go back in NAV and change Spotsmeyer Furnishings color location code, the default location code that I have associated with it, from yellow to say blue, and then come back here and refresh this list, Spotsmeyer Furnishing drops off my list. So this is a refreshable list. Now I can use this to create inquiries, and I can create other types of information, charts, graphs, pivots, etc. So if you like to create pivot tables, you can just come up here and say, add a pivot table. Come over here, it just creates this. Now you can start creating the different types of table based on the filters. Or if you'd like some assistance, you could always just say recommended pivot table. Actually, I should probably start from here. Yeah. And now it can help me get some good suggestions for what my pivot table should look like, and I can add charts and timelines and all sorts of other information that may be of interest to me. So this is a good view, good way of doing it. Now in here though, notice that all of my columns are only the ones that were available on my customer list screen. So here, the only columns I'm seeing are the columns that were available to me inside of Dynamics NAV customers, this list rather. So A final thought is if you do not want to use this or you do not see that the NAV toolbar, Dynamics NAV toolbar, and you do not have JET, what can you do? If you're using Microsoft Dynamics NAV 2013 or newer, you will have access to OData. The first thing you'd want to do is go and expose this customer's list as a web service. How do you know and how do you do that? Let's look at this page here, customers. I click on the menu. I say help about this page. This gives me the page number 22. I can go to Dynamics NAV and I can go to Web Services. And here within Web Services, I can create a list. Now, unfortunately for me, this has already been created as a web service. I would otherwise have clicked in New, selected Page 22, given it a service name, and then clicked on Publish. Once I click Publish, I would then be able to take my OData URL. You can right-click and copy this. And in Microsoft Excel, let's just go ahead and create a brand new spreadsheet. And here I would be able to go to Data and say New Query from other sources, from OData Feed. And this should come up in a second. Okay, didn't. You know, let me try it this way. Yeah. Sorry, you'd have to click on Get External Data. I was clicking the wrong one. Now here, if I want to, I can also browse, or I've already got the URL, so I'll just type that in. I'm using Windows username and password, so I don't need credentials. I'm going to hit Next. And very long password I have. It's going to ask me if this is what I'm looking for. So yes, I'm looking for this particular page. I hit Next. If I wanted to, I could have also selected which columns I wanted, but for now, I'll just go ahead and say yes, put it out, give me an output as a table. So this is a way I can also get all of my customers directly from NAV into Microsoft Excel. Then I can build other reports and charts and stuff around it. And anytime I want to refresh it, I simply come here and say refresh all, or refresh this one table if I have multiple tables. I will not have time to talk about Power Pivot, but if you were using Power Pivot, then you'd be able to create relationships using multiple web services that you create in NAV, and you can link those two together. So I can link my customer list with my sales orders list and have some sort of a view that gives me the best of. An alternative is that we already create those queries using the query object that ties information from my customer table and the sales order table as a unique query, and then I expose that query in Microsoft Excel. So those are my Excel-based reporting options. By design, I've spent more time around Microsoft Excel because that's where you have the most amount of flexibility. I will spend the rest of my time today talking about Microsoft Word-based reports. So let's go ahead, let's just close out all of my different Excel instances. But I do advise you to look at the Jet Reports player. You can download it for your version of NAV, for your version of Windows, excuse me, and you can see these sales type reports, financials reports, management reports, and much, much more. Some really good examples come from here. Okay, so let's talk about Microsoft Word-based reporting. What is it good for? It's pretty good for sales, for purchase reports, for tabular reports as well. Not as good as Excel, but still quite simple. And then for, generally I'd say for external facing reports. Why? Because you might want to create something that's nice and polished, that you can just drop things in different areas of a Word document and be able to quickly use it. I've seen some customers use this for a pre-filled form that they will have. So they might have a quote that happens in the form of a 6 or 7 page document, and you only need certain areas of that document to have values that are replaced by. So think of creating a proposal or a quote that says, "Dear customer name," and that customer name will automatically be replaced with the customer's name down the road. Or the total amount of the quote is, and there's a placeholder. Or you might say the following items are being sold to you, and then there's a tabular component that allows the values to be automatically filled. Please excuse me while I take a quick water break. Okay, I'm back. So those types of things best happen with Microsoft Word. Now, Microsoft Word reporting, again, is only available with NAV 2015 and NAV 2016. So let's sit back and get into that functionality. Where do we start? Well, you do want to download and install the Jet Express for Microsoft Word toolbar. Again, this is free with your purchase of NAV 2015 and 2016. You do need to download this, and if you need any help, you can ask our team, although this is a pretty straightforward download. Once you download and you install the toolbar, where you do need help from our team if you're not really savvy with the Dynamics NAV objects, is you will need our help to import the objects into the database and compile them. You will get a toolbar much like this. Now, you can't do much directly with Microsoft Word without starting a report from Microsoft Dynamics NAV. So unlike the Excel-based model where I can say design and start designing reports from scratch, the Word one doesn't quite work that way. So let's just minimize this. Let's go inside of Dynamics NAV. Where you want to start off with is understanding first which reports you want to modify. I usually use the example of a sales quote or a sales invoice. So let's first identify which report is run on a sales quote. So when I go to my sales quote and I click my print button, a certain report comes about, automatically publishes. How does Dynamics know which report I'm talking about? Because I have got about 300 or so reports in Dynamics NAV at any given point in time. So if you've ever looked at the Object Designer, you've probably seen under reports, boy, there are quite a few. As a matter of fact, out of the box, I think there are 2 formats for quote, 2 formats for invoices, etc., one for North America and one for worldwide. The way Dynamics NAV determines which reports are run is by something called a report selection. So we go to report selections, and I look for report selection sales, because I'm looking for a sales-related one. Here, the usage option will tell me which report prints when I have an invoice, 10074 is printed, which report is printed when I run a quote, etc. So sales quote is report ID 10076. Now, 10076 typically prints a report that is designed and developed using the Visual Studio Report Designer in Dynamics NAV. So that RDLC, Report Designer Language Client-Based Reports. So you saw, remember that table I had at the beginning of my presentation. So what we do first is go in and tell the system not to run that format, still use all the data and everything, the business logic underneath that report I don't need to change. There might be special calculations, there might be a lot of magic that happens under the hood. That's not what we're interested in changing. We just want our report to look different. So how do we do that? We are going to go ahead and say report layout selection. So here, I'm going to select report 10076. Now, in prep for this presentation, I'd actually changed this around to use a different method. So I'm going to say this was running the RDLC built-in method. What did that RDLC built-in method use out of the box? So if I ran an example of this report, let's say run this for, I think I have a, what we'll call 1001. Just verify that I actually have a quote with that number. 1001, yep, I do have that. So back here, run report. Let's just print it as PDF. This was also a nice new option that got added, I think, around 2013 R2. So when I run this report, it looks something like this. And maybe not exactly what I need to look like. It might not be my favorite way of presenting a report. So we can change this to look a little bit different. How do we go about it? We're going to come here and we'll say instead of using the RDLC built-in, you'll use a custom layout. It will open up a window like this. Now, you will normally not have any custom layout pre-created. So the first thing you're going to do is you will click on New. You'll say you're looking for a Word report layout. You'll hit OK, and it will add a line like this. Now here, you can start creating a report at this point. So you would select this line, and you can say Edit Layout, and the system will open up Microsoft Word. And now you've got a blank slate on which to design a report. You can create your boxes, you can create your colors, your themes, etc. Sounds like a lot of work. Not always interesting. Maybe sure I can start off and say put in my invoice number, put in my logo, and so on. Just not very much fun at all. So instead of going about this, what I'm typically interested in doing is going and grabbing a pre-built report template. So if you're using a newer version of Microsoft Word, let's go ahead and just click on File, New. You may have noticed that you have the ability to grab from other people's created libraries or online template libraries. So I can say I'm looking for a quote. I type that in and I search. The system will look through thousands of online templates and it will present my options. So if I want to create a quote based off of layout like this, so, all right, this seems like something that interests me. I'll do this and I'll give it a name, a file name, and I'll save this Word report for future use. So we're going to put this on my desktop. Okay. Not sure why it wants me to do that, but let's just call it a sales quote 2. I already have one, so that's fine, and I'm going to save this. And now I've got a Word file saved with this layout. I'm going to close this file, and when I go back into Dynamics NAV, I'm going to say for this new layout, we are going to import a file to use. So here on my desktop, why did it not use? Bear with me for a quick second. For some reason, it did not like or did not save. Or I just put it in a different location. I put it in Documents. That's what happened. Yes. All right. So we'll come back in here into Dynamics NAV, or back on the Customer Report screen. We'll say Import Layout and grab this from my Documents folder called Sales Quote 2. Now this layout is associated with this report. If I want to start mapping my fields, I'm going to say Edit Layout. This time it's going to open that specific thing that I've pre-imported. Here I can say, all right, change my logo here. I want to change this picture and use my company's logo. We'll work offline. Grab it from my desktop. I believe I have a Cronus logo. It's my company logo right here. And instead of typing in my company's name, I can start putting information from here. So I've got my sales header information. I go to my copy loop, and I'd be able to take things like from my page loop, I can grab information. You have to know a few things within Dynamics NAV, and if you don't, it'll be a little bit of a trial and error type of situation, but I can get some information very quickly. I know by default that my company address 1 holds my company name. Now there are times when it may not let you, good Lord. Okay, let me just, I don't know what just happened here. Okay, so there are times it may not let you enter something in a particular holder, and if it doesn't, that's okay. We'll go ahead and we'll unselect and reselect this area, or remove that placeholder, and just manually put in our information here. So there you go. It put that information there. If I want to put additional information about my company, I can start putting that here, and I can say this is company information address 2. This is my company address. I can remove all these other placeholders and put company address 3. Etc. Company address 4. So as I add my placeholders, these will all go in place. I can put my customers billed to address 1, billed to address 2. Things like payment terms. When I'm not sure whether that information exists or not, you just start typing in, and it will find any matching result. Say payment terms description, a salesperson code, I can put that in. And then for things like quantities and lines. So now I have things that publish over a set of rows, repeaters. So how do I handle that? This is probably one of the more important things to know about word-based reporting. I would first select everything on this row, and then I would tell the system that all this information is coming from a copy loop or a page loop, etc. So I can select from a page loop, a copy loop, or whichever type of loop I need it to be, where this information draws from, and then I'm going to have that repeat. So I know this is a line-based information, so I'm going to select this particular part of the thing to repeat. So expand all of my trees, within copy loop, under page loop. I need this information to be line-related information. My sales line, and I'll say insert. Now, it knows that all this information is going to repeat, so we're going to say things like quantity, temp line, sales line, quantity. I'm going to put that in the quantity column. And I might have a description that I want to put in. And at this point, you get the idea, so I'm going to stop adding more fields. We have enough fields at this point to at least get an idea, and I can put in other information as well. We can go ahead and we can close this file, and it says, do you want to import the changes? I'll say yes. And here, at this point, I can run this report to test how this will work. So I can say run report for sales quote 1001. I'll put this in PDF as well, so we get a good sense for how this will run. Now you'll see my company logo is there, the company's information. If you're wondering why my company's address didn't print out, it's actually because there was an option here called print address, and I said no. So we'll print that and we'll run that again. So now this time when I run it, will say my company's information, the customer's information, sales, and all the things that I put in that repeat. So those will automatically repeat. My unit price would have repeated, my line total. So very good for creating something based off of a pre-existing template. This should give you a lot of flexibility in how you want your reports to look. Now, one other thing you can also use this for is a simple table-based report. So a good example of that is a report like an items list report. Now, I happen to know my item report numbers off the top of my head, but so I'm just going to type in 10143. It's already set to run with a custom layout. What did I do here? Let's go to my custom layout screen, and let's edit this layout. It was actually very simple. I can even edit and do this over from scratch. So let's just delete this, everything that existed. All right, I'm going to go ahead and move the table. I want this to be a 2-column report with my item number and my description. So just my list of items. We'll call it item number, description. If I want this report to have a certain, or this table to have a certain format, I could also run my typical things like my format table function, make it look all nice and pretty with my colors and my shades, right? And now what I'm going to do is over here, I'm going to make these rows repeat with information from the item table. And then I expand this, and I know I'm looking for an item number field. And this cell gets the item number. This cell gets a description. For this, yes, import changes, and when I run this report, I'm going to be able to get an output, just like that. So very simple, easy to use, and as a final thought, I'm going to open this up for questions as well. If there are questions, I'll like to add maybe 5 minutes to the end. But even if you are using a standard report layout, even if you're running a report and you want to modify that using standard tools like SQL or Visual Studio, you can do that using Dynamics NAV. So back on your home screen, when you first run to your report layouts page, if you don't want to use Microsoft Word for reports, so we'll just go report, layout selection. I could go to report like 10074, which is a sales invoice report. Right now it's using the built-in report using RDLC. I can say custom layouts, and I'll tell it that I'm building a new report. I do want it to use RDLC, but I want it to be my own, not what Microsoft has. So here I can say edit layout, and this time it's going to launch my reporting tool like Microsoft SQL Report Builder. And now I'm going to be able to use the report builder Studio and create all the details. So if you don't want to use Word, you don't want to use Excel, these options are also available. So with that, Kim, if you have any questions, I'd like to open up the floor to those. I am completed with the presentation.
For questions. So again, on the right-hand side, let's put in what questions you have.
And while we're waiting on questions, my email address is here. If you're too shy to ask, you can always email me. If you're looking for some training, detailed training, there's only so much we can cover in 1 hour. But if you like detailed training on Microsoft Word-based reporting, Excel-based reporting, or setting up JET reports for Word or Excel, you can email support@interdynbmi.com. If you're looking to purchase a paid version of JET reports, like the JET Essentials or JET Enterprise, or if you're looking for any other add-ons for Dynamics NAV, you can always mail sales@interdynbmi.com or email your account executive or account manager.
Excellent. This was great, AJ. Let's just talk while we're waiting to see if folks have any questions for you, because it's still empty right now. What are some common questions that you're asked? I mean, this is using the two most important writing tools, right? Report writing tools that are out there. What's stopping folks? What's a great way to get started?
Well, I think one of the things that stops folks is that these tools are not pre-installed. So even though you get the license for it with your purchase in NAV, if nobody has told you how to install it, or if you haven't gone through the process of downloading the tools, installing the toolbars in Excel and Word, or getting the objects in, you won't be able to benefit from this functionality. So a lot of times people don't use it simply because they don't have it. The other thing is that I get asked often is the Word-based reporting tool just as powerful as when I design a report using Visual Studio? And the answer is no. In that there are things that simple things like creating a sales invoice, some of those things happen quite well. There are some complex types of reports that are simply not possible. Also, if you're trying to do, I think, some financial type of reports using Microsoft Word, it's not very conducive. So there are limitations. But what's good is you do not need to know how to do Visual Studio Report Designer to be able to create reports with Word. The burden or the barrier of entry is very low. As you see, most of the things are quite intuitive. JET has some pre-created videos. We have some easy to get off the ground type of training that within hours, not days, within hours can have you equipped to start creating some reports for your team.
Excellent. Well, it sounds like you covered everything really well. No questions are in the queue. Thank you so much, AJ, as always. You're great.